Okay, I think some people are trying to get back on. So let's see how many people we have who have rejoined us. Sorry about that little flub up there. We'll let everyone try to get back on. Okay, I see you, Teresa. All right, we're just going to skip that little video because that was doing some funky things. See how many people we have who have come back. 14 of you have come back. Okay, we'll get started. Let's make sure I'm recording. Yes, I was recording. Okay, as we said before, many of you may live in deed-restricted communities. I hope that you were able to join us. If not, this will be recorded so that, let me make sure we're being recorded. Yes, we are. So that you can catch it later. And what we were talking about was that many of us, we may live in a deed-restricted community, and we got to think about all the reasons that you chose to live there. You know, why did you choose to live there? Mostly because probably for safety, and also for other reasons such as property value. And also so you would have things to do and, you know, friends to make nearby. So those are the reasons you chose to live there. And then maybe sometimes you feel like you're in conflict with wanting to have a very natural landscape and, you know, with what the HOA wants. So what we're going to talk about today is we are going to talk about how we can maybe come to terms with some of the people and learn to think a little differently. Have them come halfway, have us come halfway, and see where we can meet in the middle. But first of all, we need to think about, you know, what do a lot of people see when they look at landscapes? Now, a lot of us, if anybody here is a master gardener or just happens to be very plant oriented and are always thinking about plants, you're walking around noticing plants, but a lot of people are not like that. And they may not have the knowledge or the, you know, ecological information that we have to judge a landscape by its ecological value. So what are they going to do, except that they are going to judge it by the first thing that we all judge everything by, and that's our eyes. We're going to judge this visually. So let me make sure I have the video on. Okay. We're going to judge this visually. So that's what most people do when they're looking at your yard. Their visual experience is usually what's going to be the most important to people. So we need to keep that in mind. Okay. Teresa, could you kind of watch the folks for me? Make sure we have everything turned off. Oh, I don't know if you can do that. Let me make you a co-host. We got to start all over again. There we go. Yes, Teresa, now you should be a co-host. Okay. So when people, they're judging with their eyes, and what is it that they're looking for that they think, you know, constitutes a great yard? Well, they like large, colorful flowers. That's really what speaks to them. They like large plants, things that they can really see, some really bold textures that really speaks to them. Okay. If everyone could turn your mics off, that will help others be able to enjoy this. Everyone has their mic off. And they also, like canopy trees. Trees always speak to people, but they like, you know, neat looking trees. And they like, what does organized complexity mean? They mean they want it to be interesting, but they still want it to be something they can understand. So we're going to get into that a lot about what people can understand. And what do people like? What, you know, when they surveyed people, and really a lot of these, this testing, the surveys that were done here were kind of psychological. This wasn't people expressing what they know is in their mind. This is just kind of like psychological tests, what people responded to. Okay, now Teresa brought me back. Thank you. Sorry about that. I was trying to get her to mute everyone. She muted everyone, including me. All right. So what do people like? And this is like a psychological thing. What's in their head that tells them this is a nice landscape? But they like lots of beds, flower beds, neatly maintained flower beds with curved bed lines. Kind of interesting. They like, you know, design sophistication. They don't want any raggedness, knowing basically that a human is there and that a human is taking care of this yard. They like open vistas, and we're going to get into why open vistas are important to humans. And you know what, unfortunately, and this may irritate some of us, but remember what I said, those who don't have quite, you know, the knowledge of landscaping or the environment or ecology and don't care to have the knowledge of those things, what they're most concerned with is what that yard looks like, not necessarily what kind of plants are in it. In fact, they could probably just not even care what type of plants are in it. And that might be distressing for us because that's like the most important thing to us, what type of plants are in it. But if you turn that around and turn it into a good thing, okay, if they don't care what type of plants are in it, that means I can use the Florida-friendly plants that I want to use, as long as I do it in a design that is pleasing to them. So that is, you know, one way to look at the situation. So what do people like? What are they looking for? Basically, what are they looking for is a well-kept, you know, they don't, you know, messy is not Florida friendly. In fact, one of the, if you decided you wanted your yard certified as Florida friendly, and you get a little sign, but there's a checklist to make sure. And I would send you the checklist first to make sure that you get enough points to be qualified as Florida friendly. And but also I would come out and verify that you have a Florida friendly yard. But you know what the number one thing is that it fits in with the aesthetic of the community. So I know in a different county, I attended a in-service via Zoom, and in a different county they were talking about, and this happens all the time, someone who was trying to fight their code enforcement citations by claiming they were Florida friendly. And in this instance, the person was actually very knowledgeable about what Florida friendly was, because when the Florida friendly people showed up, she was annoyed because she knew she'd been caught, because she knew she wasn't Florida friendly. Number one is you have to fit the aesthetic of the community. And generally people who just want to have, you know, no other way to put it, just very messy yards, generally are also going to have a lot of invasive exotics, and that'll knock you right out of the Florida friendly ballpark as well. So what people are looking for, basically they want to feel comfortable looking at your yard, especially in an HOA. Because as I said before, you made the decision, I want to live in this gated community. And you had your reasons for doing that. Safety, friends around. You get to do fun things, you know, and activities that they have going on. But also it's an investment. It's your biggest investment, most likely. Your home is your biggest investment. And when you decide to live in a community, a deed restricted community, you really have to come to terms with the fact that the very least your front yard and your curb appeal, your house belongs more or less to the community, because you are part of a catalog advertising that community, and you chose that. So that's something you really have to think about. It does not mean you cannot have Florida-friendly plants. You certainly can, but you still want to keep everyone happy in the process. So you want your neighbors and you want the folks on your architectural review board to feel comfortable in your yard and looking at your yard. They have to understand it. You got to remember we all feel a little uncomfortable on somebody else's property, right? It's not our home. So you've got that little bit of uncomfort anyway. And what we want to do is make them feel comfortable. If they feel comfortable in our yard, they are a lot more likely to approve what we're doing. So what's going to make them feel comfortable is they have to understand what's going on in that yard. And they like it neat, and there has to be evidence that, a human is caring for this place. And we're going to discuss some theories, some psychological theories going way back to the beginning of time that expresses how me, you, and everyone, why we may react the way we do to certain landscapes. And there's actually 4 theories we're going to discuss here, and psychologists studied this. There's the innate evolutionary theory, the prospect and refuge theory, the emotion/pleasure theory, and the cultural and experience theory in what we're looking for in yards. So let's go way back to this evolutionary theory. Basically, what the psychologists determined is when they showed people different yards and landscapes, even just landscapes like this, they, judged their brain waves and their reaction. And most people felt most comfortable looking at a savanna with a low ground cover, even texture. It's pastoral. We even like that word, don't we? That makes us feel at peace, the pastoral. The depth of the field and the widely scattered groups of trees. And why is that? Well, that from whenever the beginning of time, that is generally where mankind, started. So what are we looking at here? We can see a long way off. We can see danger coming. But also there's some hiding places in those trees or in the, semi-tall grass, not too tall. Basically, we can spot danger and we can hide from danger, or, we can see what we need for our own prey as well. And they found out, we all love these conifer forests. We think they're absolutely amazing and beautiful, but being dropped in the middle of one may not make us feel all that comfortable all the time, because we can't read the landscape. We can't see far enough to assess all the dangers. That's what it basically goes around to. So let's go with historically. When people gathered enough influence and money and prestige, and they started shaping the land to make it look like how they wanted it to look, and they started gardening. What did they do? But they made little savannas. They, that's what they emulated, even, in these formal French gardens and the Japanese gardens. These Japanese gardens are nothing but little models of a savanna. If you think about it, you look at that, even the little bonsai tree, with these, the thin trunk, but the wide spreading branches, and then the flat view. That's just what we're looking for in that theory. Okay, and the prospect refuge theory is kind of the same thing. It just moves a little more forward in history, but you know, it's beneficial to survival. Again, we want to be able to see a long distance, but we also want to be able to hide. It's kind of the same thing. So if you have the benefit of like living on the edge of those two things in the hiding places, as well as being able to see what's coming at you if any danger is coming, that makes you feel comfortable as well. But you know, like the woods nearby houses, you know, houses basically food, so you can survive. Then there's the emotion and the pleasure theory. What that is based on is just something that, you know, you like it for whatever reason. It's pretty to you, so you have a good reaction to it. It's not based on knowledge. Many of us, we know what all these plants are, but how people react, they don't care to know what those plants are. So even signage like there that's pointing out that those are zephyr lilies, that is of interest to people who are already interested. That's, you know, of interest to me. It's of interest to a lot of people who are horticulturally inclined. It's not of interest to the general public. It is not going to make them feel any better or any worse about the landscape that they see just because they can name the plant. It's all based on emotion and whether or not they think it's pretty or it smells nice, things like that. Or maybe they had some pleasant experience that it's bringing back up. Here's an interesting one, the cultural and the experience theory. This is interesting to me because adults, when they studied them, had the same happy brain waves if they looked at a landscape that they grew up in or were very familiar with as they did when they looked at a classic savanna landscape. So like this top one, if you grew up in Levittown or someplace like that, you know, this scene here makes you feel really comfortable. Down on the left, I put that there because I spent my first 11 years in Pittsburgh, so that scene makes me very comfortable. Neither one of these have fantastic landscaping, especially, you know, the row house there. Somebody did something to those meatball shrubs there, but it's back to our experience, our culture, what feels like home. On the bottom right, you know, if you grew up in Miami or your grandparents, you spent a lot of time with them, this type of Florida home is going to be what gives you those feel-good feelings. And it really has nothing to do with how ecological the yard is. It has much more to do with our own experiences. So adults had the same happy brain waves looking at the kind of home they grew up in as they did looking at a savanna. Children, only they'll choose a savanna every time because they don't have that life's experience. So that kind of says something to you right there. There we are growing up in our idyllic childhood there. So, but what about across all cultures? What is it we're looking for across all cultural experiences? Well, all cultures, what they have in common is that they're looking, the basic features they're looking for is that openness, some smooth ground surface. Didn't say it had to be turf, but some kind of smooth ground surface. But most importantly, I mean, what gives us life? What's going to make us feel comfortable? Either water, or if not water right there, evidence of water. And what does evidence of water, I mean, we're not even consciously thinking about this, but what's evidence of water? Of course, if everything is green and healthy looking. That just comforts us that, you know, life can happen here. And then let's go to cultural norms. You know, you may argue with this and saying, well, that's not me, but a lot of people, we want to fit in. And we know that now more than ever, we miss people. We may not get to go to church. And if we do, we can't get close to them, we can't hug them. You know, we may not get to go to bingo, or we may not get to go to whatever clubs you were involved with before, or family reunions, things like that. So we're realizing now how much we miss human beings and interaction with them. But also with that, there's a part of us, you know, it's called peer pressure exists for a reason. And that's because we just like to fit in. So we like to have good relations with our neighbors, but also with our homes. We do like to exhibit, I'm proud of this place. And a lot of us, that's what we are trying to exhibit. I'm proud of how nature friendly my place is, but our neighbors might see it a little differently. So that's where we're trying to find this common ground right now. And as I said before, you got to remember, if you have made the choice to live in a deed restricted community, that front yard is basically public space, and it doesn't mean, you know, anyone can come up and have a picnic in your front yard or anything, but the visual of your front yard is public space, and it helps sell your community. And that's kind of, you know, why you moved there. Oh, there he is saying hi. So those cultural norms, we talked about what everybody's looking for, you know, the some smooth areas, you know, flat areas. So property values, just the way that our culture goes, you know, usually to have a good property value, you need a green lawn, large trees, well-kept, colorful plants. That's people feeling happy that their investment is well protected. But then there is security just in general. You want some hint that a human is around taking care of that yard. And so, you know, the open views or the traditional designs a lot of times give people that comfort. Now let's talk about when these cultural norms collide. When I don't live in a deed restricted community, and, you know, for a reason, and my yard would probably, you know, be one of the ones there really I would be getting notes and things about. So, but what I feel I'm seeing might be different. You got to consider not everyone is a plant person. So we got to think about what they're seeing versus what we're seeing. So with maintenance knowledge, our wildflowers in our meadows, maybe this is what we see. This is how we see ourselves. We're just happy and free and, you know, beautiful flower child running through the meadow, enjoying nature. That might be what we think our particular flower bed or our yard looks like. Whereas our neighbor might see that. You can see where the two things look different to two different people. And when they see that, almost every one of them is also going to see that. That scares them. Again, they can't read that yard, and they think there might be danger there. Now, concerned about wildlife. And concerned has two different meanings here. Many of us, this is how we see ourselves in our yard, because we are concerned about the well-being of the wildlife. But our neighbors, they are concerned about the wildlife as in how it might harm them. So therefore, they see this in the same yard. And, you know, environmental attitude. We may see this in our yard. Isn't that beautiful? You know, that it's just a lovely forest, woodland, where anyone would be happy. This is what we think we see. But our neighbor sees this. it's kind of scary to them because they can't read it. They don't understand what's going on. And they react, you know, almost in a frightened way. Well, again, as I keep mentioning, not everyone really even thinks about plants. And as I said earlier, they don't care what type of plants you have in your yard. They just care what it looks like. And part of that is some UF researchers have come up with this theory of plant blindness. I'm sorry, I think they're from another university, not UF, but they've come up with this theory of plant blindness, meaning this is weird to us plant people, but there's people going around out there who walk right past plants without mentally naming them or even taking note of them. So, and part of it is maybe they don't have any personal meaning. Maybe it just doesn't, they didn't grow up loving plants, or it's just not one of their things. I mean, they may be into things that we're not, that we don't take note of. I mean, my son-in-law can tell where anybody is around the county because of their vehicle, not because of the person. And because he sees their vehicle. And even, you know, my husband drives a county truck. I couldn't tell you which one or what number or what it looks like, but my son-in-law can. So it's just, we're all different in how we identify, you know, different things in the world. But most of us are anthropocentric. What does that mean? It means if you walked up on this porch where this lady is in this top picture, what's the first thing your eye's going to look at? Well, unless you're very rude, of course, because you're coming to her house, of course, you're going to look at her face, right? Why? Because we are trained to look at faces, because we are humans and we are trained to look at other humans, and we've kind of developed that as being polite, but it is also a security thing. We are mentally assessing, is this a safe situation? Is this person going to harm me? So we look at faces and we judge that way. Animals have faces, so, you know, and we do the same thing. Plants don't have faces. That's part of their issue, why there's this theory of plant blindness. Also, people, when they're only able to judge about 6 different visual choices at a time. And plants are not generally going to harm us. If we jumped in poison ivy and rolled around in it, it might harm us. If we jumped in some thorns, it might harm us. But generally, the trees and the plants that we're walking by are not going to hurt us. I mean, there could be something lurking in them, which could hurt us, but then we're still paying attention to the danger, not the plant itself. So there's so many things going on in the brain that a lot of people have, the trees don't move, you know, the plants don't move. So therefore, their mind is processing out tree, 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 bush, 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 not necessary for me to pay attention to. So that's, you know, what we're dealing with. And unfortunately, the natural landscapes have got a bad reputation over time. People saw some that they couldn't read, they didn't understand. Therefore, word got around, you know, we don't like those kind of landscapes. They don't have those big flowers, colorful flowers that they're looking for. There are a lot of native plants that do have those, by the way. Maybe it's too dense, makes me nervous. It looks weedy, we hear that a lot. It's messy and unkempt, and I can't tell that a human is really involved. And it just makes them uncomfortable. Well, what can we do to have what we want and to make them feel psychologically comfortable without them really even knowing it? That's the fun part. We can make changes that will make them comfortable, and they may not even know why. So you can have the meadow that I talked about of wildflowers, but somehow, some way or another, make it clear that it's there on purpose. And one of the ways, this is really easy here, is They just mow around it so you have a walking area around it. They're framing it one way or another. They're framing it, making it look like a flower bed, and that's intentional and on purpose. Pathways. Pathways speak a lot. People understand pathways. Okay, these are where those plants go that I'm not paying that much attention to, but I walk here. You know, they can understand that type of thing. So define those beds. You want a self-explanatory yard as much as possible. We get, you know, where our anger comes from is we understand our yard. We understand what we're trying to do. And we understand it's very important. It's our passion to attract wildlife and stop putting chemicals in the earth. But we have to, you know, reach them where they can understand. And what they can understand is things that make them feel secure. So define beds and, you know, just make it self-explanatory that here's where we walk, here's where I have a bed of wildflowers, here's where I have a bed of native plants. Here is where, you know, I have my butterfly garden, things such as that. Here is where my family sits in the evenings. This one, I really like this picture on the left. Of course, you know, back to that kind of proving my point, how anthropocentric we all are. What's the first thing we saw? We saw that little girl, of course, because, you know, she's a human. We looked at the human. And then we thought, wow, man, I wish I could have a fountain like that. But what I really want you to see is beyond her. Well, there's pathways there, aren't there? Very clear pathway. And this is really interesting to me because there's a well-manicured short shrub creating a border around this bed. And then they even threw in as the, you know, the most central thing in that bed is this little topiary tree. It looks like a lollipop there. But look then under that, what is that? That's a whole bunch of wildflowers just, you know, growing in mass that without the other elements around it would just look messy to people. So this is going to attract a lot of pollinators, a lot of butterflies, and a lot of fun things that we want. Meanwhile, we have framed it in a way that makes people comfortable, makes people know a human is maintaining this, and this is like this on purpose. Again, as we mentioned before, they like curved bed lines and things being, you know, very purposefully in a bed. Again, my son-in-law, he mows my lawn, and he doesn't understand what I feel is a weed and what isn't a weed. So therefore, he's kind of afraid of what to cut, because to him, everything that's not turf is a weed. So he would just, you know, if he had his way, just mow it all down. So he doesn't know where I am in my mind with what's a weed and what's not a weed. So, you know, we're working on establishing beds and bed lines so that he understands, cut here, and I'll deal with what's in there. So, you know, linear plantings, plants in rows, curved bed lines, keep it trimmed, keep it looking good, and the foundation plants. And I think all of these photos here are almost all of, there's a huge percentage of native plants in all three of these photos. But it still looks like a very formal, yet fun, you know, landscapes. So when we're talking about that, let's go with landscape design. You can have natives, you can have Florida friendly, and still work in design modes so that people are happy. You know, use the color wheel. Go back to 4th grade and look at that color wheel, like with these plants here, the yellow with the purple cone flower, and then even purple behind it. Down here, it's not even that many flowers. I think there's some impatiens with white flowers, but generally we have coleus purple with you know, things with green. You know, try and, you know, stay in good design and color composition with those bold patterns, keeping them well maintained in beds, and that should make people feel pretty comfortable. Don't clutter. That's, you know, again, just like, you know, inside your house, even if you have the most nice things in the world, if there's too much of it, again, that makes people feel uncomfortable. So when we're talking about cluttering, here's just a little thing that I found. You know, I think it relates to a lot of us plant people. Are we horticulturalists? Possibly. That may be some of us. So let's talk, I'm going to show you some pictures, and just to kind of get an idea of what curb appeal is about. And remember, like I said, if you live in a gated community, curb appeal is really it. You're selling your community. The front of your house is selling your community every day. That's what you signed up for. So for your neighbors to feel comfortable and not start writing the HOA about you and send somebody there, you know, your house has to feel welcoming. Even if you have no intention of inviting people in, it still has to make them feel welcoming. And I always consider that front door, even though windows look like eyes, I consider the front door kind of like the eyes of your house. Meaning, if you meet someone and they don't show you their eyes or are always turning away, you're not all that comfortable with them, are you? But if you can look at their eyes, you're more comfortable. So I think that front door is like meeting someone who, you know, greets you with their eyes. So being able to see that front door is very important. From the roadside, it just makes them feel more comfortable. Now does this have very much curb appeal? If you're standing in the street and you have to go up to that house, how comfortable are you going to feel? Now, the people inside might be, oh, I love it because I don't have to bother with those people in the street. But then again, remember, like I said, you're trying to get what you want, so you have to give the community what they want. This one, yeah, that feels very welcoming, doesn't it? I feel there's a clear path to that front door. And, you know, everything looks pretty nice and, you know, well taken care of. I'd feel comfortable going to that door to talk to them about their yard. Here too, this is great, you know, and this is kind of an older home, but they kept everything low, nothing's hiding the house, and there's that evidence of green, you know, it just feels like a comfortable place to walk into. Here's another one. Yeah, that's pretty nice. I'd feel comfortable going there. Kind of interesting, if you look real close at this yard, what they have done is the turf is actually the path, and then most of the others is mulched beds. Kind of an interesting way of doing it. This one, if you got to walk up to somebody's house to talk to somebody about, you know, an issue in the HOA, are you going to feel comfortable going there? I'm not. I don't know about you. Another one. This is a nice house. But if you really study it, first of all, we have invasive exotic Boston ferns all over the place, but that's so they wouldn't, and that they're purposefully growing. So Florida Friendly is out for that, even though, you know, it's very well cared for. But I'm a little confused and I can't see where to get to the front door. So it makes me uncomfortable. Like I'm going to disappear into a jungle there, and going in a strange place, I'm not sure I want to do that. So I'm going to be put on edge. And this is what happens to your neighbors. Here as well. Oh, here we really have the Boston ferns. Here as well. Yeah, I'd feel on edge by walking up to that place. I just know there's a guy in there not completely dressed or something, you know, I'm not going near this place. And you got to think about, if it were you going to somebody else's house, how you would feel. And then if they're on edge, the conversation is not going to go well. So what can we do? We can have our Florida-friendly plants and have them in traditional foundation planting beds. You can make those beds as large as your community allows. Make sure you know that, and we're going to get into that. But remember, mulch is our friend in this situation. Mulch hides a multitude of sins. It creates a cared for, neat appearance. Mulch, to me, I always compare it to making your bed in your bedroom. No matter how neat your bedroom is, if your bed isn't made, oh, wait, I don't think I made my bed today, but anyway, if your bed isn't made, your room looks messy. On the other way, if your bed is made, it goes a long way towards making your room already look a whole lot better. Mulch does the same thing for outside in our yard. This is cool. I really like this idea. So in your community, you probably have to have a certain percentage of turf, and please make sure what that is. If you're, we'll get into that in a little bit, but make sure you follow all the rules. But here's something really cool that you can do. Have that percentage of turf. Make sure you look in the rules and find out where, because sometimes it's not just a percentage, it is where it's physically located. Sometimes there has to be turf abutting the neighbor's turf, or there has to be turf at the street, which works for us here because it's kind of a trick of the eye. You put a strip of turf in the front, it tricks your eye into thinking there's more turf than there is. And that goes back to that evolutionary theory where we like that flat, smooth surface because it makes us feel comfortable, because we can see the yard, we can judge the yard, we can understand what's happening. So that's just kind of a trick of the eye. Put that turf out front, but you don't necessarily, have to use a whole lot of it. It gives it, use the turf kind of as framing it, but it tricks your eye from the street to thinking there's more than it is. And this is a neat phrase I heard from somewhere, and I love it. Turf, frame it, don't farm it. Don't just have pastures of turf for the heck of having turf, or have your whole yard turf. Use it to frame the rest of your yard. And what you probably didn't notice, this was my cover photo. This is a standard Florida-friendly landscaping photo. I think it's taken in Gainesville. So what you probably didn't notice in the very beginning is there's really not a heck of a lot of turf in that yard. The turf we're looking at in the front, I think, is from across the street. But this house that we're looking at, you look at it and you think it's a pretty, very nice looking but traditional yard. But if you look, there's not that much turf, but the way they placed it tricks your eye into thinking that there's more. And of course, that's less water that you have to use to keep that turf healthy. Trees, people do like trees, so you can use the trees for shade and energy efficiency around your yard. Use as many as your regulations allow, but don't use them to hide the front of your house. Again, we want that people to feel comfortable walking up to that front door. And you can use a variety of plant material. A Florida-friendly certified yard has a minimum of 15 different varieties of plants. And that will in itself attract wildlife and help avoid insect and disease problems because you don't have a monoculture in your yard. Diversity with all species creates a healthier ecosystem, and it adds color, texture, interest. But remember, what looks good to people is plants that are the same plant them in mass together. That's just one of those design tricks. It also makes people feel comfortable and helps the pollinators find those plants. So we're going to do a little kind of a game here. We did this when we did this in person. So let me state right here that Rita and Bill who are in my photos, are actors in this situation. Rita doesn't live in a gated community, and Bill is not he also doesn't live in a gated community, nor is he an HOA president. But I'm using them to pretend that they are, so you can put yourself in these people's places. So let's pretend that Rita here, let's meet Rita, and she has her list. This is what she wants. Number one, she wants to protect the environment. She wants to attract wildlife. She doesn't like chemicals. She wants to conserve water. She wants a natural look. She wants to, she wants to feel safe and in control in this yard. She does, it's her yard. She wants to feel pleasure in her yard. I mean, that's kind of, it's our personal space. We want to feel pleasure there. She likes to express herself. And she wants to be proud of her community. Those are her lists. Let's see how her list matches up with the HOA president's list. Now remember, like I said, he's not really an HOA president. I had just used them as examples, as actors in this situation. So here, and what we see in red on Rita's list and on Bill's list is where they actually have common ground. So that's where you can start to maybe work together. So what's Bill concerned about? That this yard protects my money because it's in my community and it affects my property value. That's his main concern. This yard fits in with the rest of the community for reason number one. I understand this yard. He may not actually have this on a list because it may be psychologically deep in his brain, but he has to be able to understand the yard. When all of the rules were followed in this yard, that's very important to him. A human being has dominance in this yard. He wants to feel safe and control in that yard, just like Rita does. He wants to feel happy in that yard, just like Rita does. He wants to feel welcome. That's a big one. Rita may not care if he feels welcome in her yard, but if she wants to get the things that she wants, he has to feel welcome in her yard. And again, he also wants to make sure this yard adds to pride in the community. So you can see where Rita's list and Bill's list, they need to start with the common ground and then see where they can go from there. Here's some strategies for working with your HOA. First of all, remember you signed that covenant, when you moved in there, and you may say, well, it was a very hectic time and I just wanted to get the house and get it over with and move in, and I didn't know how restrictive it would be. But when it comes onto it, you signed it. So you might as well learn to live, within those parameters or make some life changes. But before you go, to the HOA or to your architectural review board, you really got to have a plan. And I mean a good looking, professional, not necessarily, you don't have to hire a landscape engineer, but wouldn't hurt if you can, but a very well done plan. And learn some of those basic design principles, because that's going to make the HOA happier. And before you start going, a lot of people just want to shout the words Florida-friendly landscaping, having no idea what it is. So before you start using the words, learn what it is, understand the 9 principles, attend these Zoom classes, or when we start meeting in person again, if you can. We've got lots of websites you can study. There's a Florida-friendly landscaping handbook. I'll put the link in the comments when I post this after it's recorded. And know what Florida-friendly plants are. Be able to identify them. And there's a book that will help you with that. I don't have the front of it here, but it's the Florida Friendly Landscape Plant Selection Guide and Guide to Design. And there are lots of ways you can get a hold of one of those, and I'll put that information in the comments as well. I'm going to veer off a little bit. I went to a talk by this gentleman, Russ Hoffman, and see, his area of study is very, very interesting. He's the owner of Beautiful Ponds in Southwest Florida. And what he does is goes into these gated communities and puts native, you know, around their drainage retention areas or their natural ponds. He puts a lot of native plants and things, but he also helps people turn their yards native. So he's dealt with a lot of HOAs, but look at what his degrees are in: botany and psychology. Interesting. So let's see what he has to say. These are just tips I picked up from him. We're going to talk about how people change and how groups change and grow, and how to convince, if we're going to convince others to go Florida friendly, we need to change how we communicate. The bullhorn in their face is not going to get anything done. Environmental psychology, that's a new field he's kind of discovering. Basically, you need to speak their language. Don't get too technical. I know native plant people, one of their favorite things to do, and that is just what they love to do, is, you know, use use Latin names for plants. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all, especially if you're in a native plant society meeting, or you're talking to another native plant person, or even a nursery person, or someone familiar with plants. Your neighbors, you start spouting off the Latin names of these plants, they're going to go cross-eyed and tune you out. And don't get too scientific as to exactly, you know, how this will save climate change and all these things. Again, they're going to tune you out. What you want to do first is encourage the love of the plants. Then you slowly sneak in the science. And how do you do that with your neighbors? You have a beautiful yard that they love to come and see. And then maybe they want to start going that direction as well. And resist the urge to convert them. Resist the urge to educate them unless they are open to it. And a lot of people aren't. So, and in any organization, in any group of people, you're going to have people who have this spirit of discord or the spirit of contention. As I have here, the haters are going to hate. For whatever reason, they're just going to keep throwing the negativity out there. I know you know them. Those aren't the people you want to concentrate on. So, you know, instead of arguing with them, which is so easy to do because they make you mad in HOA meetings or wherever, but, you know, just say, okay, thank you for your comments, and we'll take that into consideration. Don't blow them off. Maybe something somewhere in there, in all that blob of negativity, maybe there is a good practical thing to consider. But don't dwell on those people. Move on, and change happens with who? With those who are willing to change. You can use this in any situation, not just plants. So you want to know your audience. If you're trying to sell, let's all go Florida friendly, or at least allow me to go Florida friendly, you got to know who you're talking to. And this is an interesting thing he picked up, you know, with, we're kind of divided a lot right now. So there's certain groups of people that words get their attention. And one group of people, these words, save. They like that word. They, or earth. You know, you use those words in your presentation, you're going to get their attention. Then there's the other group that maybe you're trying to bring along too. And they love the words preserve. It's a nice word. Legacy. We, and also like our fathers, like our forefathers, like like those before. You just kind of know your audience and work those words, those keywords into how you're speaking, and then maybe that will speak to them. How many people do you need to convince to enact a real change? You're going to be surprised, it's only about 15%. So it's not as overwhelming as a job if you're facing down the entire architectural review board or your, entire HOA. Only 15% of them. The naysayers, the one with all that negative energy, thank you very much, and concentrate on those who are open to change. You're going to have your early adopters. They were with you from the beginning. They're already there. That's great. Your midway adopters, they're the ones sitting back not saying much. And they're waiting to see if it's going to catch on. Kind of keep your eye on them too. And then your late adopters, they're the ones who's like, okay, well, I guess this is what we do now. So, but those naysayers, the ones who really irritate you, they probably won't ever change. But then again, remember, you only need 15% of the people to enact change in your community. So when you're working with your HOA, I want you to go in there fully loaded and knowledgeable with what you're doing. So not only know everything you can about Florida Friendly, if that's what you're presenting them, you got to know everything about their rules too. Because if they tell you something, you have to know if that was correct or not. So go in there very knowledgeable. Review the approval process. Meet those board members. Better yet, and I know you're like, no, become a board member. How else is change going to happen except within? Check the plant lists that they have. Make sure it jives with Florida Friendly and their regulations. When they check out their turf requirements, and as I said before, if it's 50%, there might be very specific places you must have the turf. And note things that are restricted. And so, don't just irritate them. Don't annoy them with the gnomes in your front yard. If they don't allow that kind of thing, pick your battles. Pick what's important to you. And what's important to us is an ecologically sound landscape. Read that association letter. Find out, get the feeling, get the vibe of what's going on. Make sure you know where your yard is. Review that property boundary survey so that you don't get in trouble doing things outside of your yard. And just be, just be a nice human. Be a considerate neighbor. Do what you're supposed to do. Pick up after your pets. Don't have something that they can be annoyed at you about. And if you're living in an HOA, at least that front part of your yard, you want to keep it up as if your house was for sale. So you're going to ask, isn't there a law stating my HOA can't stop me from having a Florida friendly landscape? The easy answer is yes. It's called Senate Bill 2080, and I will make a PDF of this. So if you email me and ask me, I will send you the PDF of this whole presentation, and you'll get to read this, the basics of this Senate bill. What I can tell you is it's kind of vague. So lawyers have a good time with vague. And St. Augustine grass is still considered Florida friendly in this law, just so you know that right up, because it goes to right plant, right place, and there are some situations where it is the right plant in the right place. Many, many, many times it isn't, but because it can be. So just know that it's easier, I think, to make friends from within than try and fight them with this. People who have fought them with this, some have won, but they've spent in excess of $200,000 in legal costs to win. I don't think any of us out here really want to do that. And then, the board spent legal costs because of you, and they're not beyond telling the rest of the neighbors your assessments went up because of them. So that makes it a really friendly place to live, huh? So yes, there's a law, but it's best to work, you know, within your HOA. So in summary, before you go spouting Florida-friendly landscaping, learn what it is, as well as learning all the rules of your HOA, and keep a good attitude about it. Remember, you signed that. You know, you're there because you wanted to be there. And so work with your HOA, not against it. Those long strips of turf in front make the turf area look larger in your yard. Have traditional foundation plantings, you know, planting beds. Don't hide your front door and make people nervous. Define all the areas of your yard and don't confuse the neighbors. And remember, you do live in that shared community, and your yard should make people feel happy so that everybody gets along a lot better. Okay, I will stop. Oh, here's some resources as well. And you can ask for this if you email me, and I'll put my email in the chat in a moment. But it is Lillyb, Lillyb as in boy, at Hernando County, all spelled out, .us as in United States. Here are some, you can look up the entire Senate Bill 2080 and also these publications that UF put out about working with your HOA. And some of these are also publications that I worked off of to create this presentation. Okay, let's see, we only have 3 chats. Okay, and Eileen just says, yes, it's very important to become a board member. You have a much better understanding of how the board makes decisions in your community. That's a good point, Eileen, and I didn't think of that one. It will also help you see things, how they see it, and the pressures and the stress that they are dealing with as well. Let me write my email here, handocounty.us. There, everyone can see that there. So if you would like a PDF of this, please email me. I'm not going to see this chat again, so I won't be able to see it and know how to email you back, but I'll be glad to send this to you. And if you have any other questions as well, you can send that to my email. And thank you very much. I do have classes every Wednesday, and you can see that on my Facebook page, and as well as Hernando County Extension. They have classes all the time as well. Tomorrow and every Thursday, Dr. Lester has a virtual plant clinic at 10 o'clock. If you go on Hernando Extension's Facebook page, you'll find the link to that. So even if you don't have a question, it's fun to sit there and learn from other people's questions, because maybe something comes up that you didn't even realize you do have a question. Okay, well, I hope everyone enjoyed that. And I know we've gone a little over an hour and I don't see anything more. Thank you, Teresa, for helping me out and moderating the people. And also thank you, Karen, for joining us from mosquito control. And we will see you again. Thank you.